Captain Jake Sullivan wiped sweat from his forehead as he guided his patrol ship through the floating wreckage of what used to be a massive alien vessel. Metal fragments drifted silently in the black void of space, twisted and burned beyond recognition. Whatever had happened here wasn't pretty. Control, this is Patrol 7. I'm seeing debris from what looks like a HFY ship. No life signs detected. Jake spoke into his radio, maneuvering carefully between chunks of torn hull plating. The response crackled back immediately. Copy that, Patrol 7. HFY ships are classified as extinct technology. Salvage what you can for research but maintain safe distance. Those ships carried unknown weapons systems. Jake had heard stories about the HFY. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were supposed to be some kind of super-advanced alien race that vanished mysteriously about 50 years ago. Most people figured they'd wiped themselves out in some civil war, but nobody really knew for sure. Their ships were rare finds, and anything recovered from them usually ended up in government labs. As Jake's salvage beam pulled in chunks of the alien metal, something caught his eye. A small section of the wreckage seemed different somehow. It wasn't glowing or sparking like the rest. Instead, it looked almost organic, like it was made of some kind of crystalline material that pulsed with a faint golden light. Well, that's new, Jake muttered, adjusting his ship's sensors for a closer look. The readings were all over the place. Whatever this thing was, it was definitely alive, but barely. The energy signature was so weak it was almost flatlined. Against his better judgment, Jake activated the retrieval system and carefully brought the strange object into his ship's cargo bay. The moment the bay doors sealed and atmosphere flooded in, he heard something that made his blood run cold. It was tiny, weak, and heartbreaking. The sound of something small and helpless crying for help. Jake rushed to the cargo bay, his heart pounding. Inside the crystalline pod, which had cracked open from the pressure change, lay the smallest alien creature he'd ever seen. It looked almost like a kitten, if kittens were made of liquid gold and starlight. The tiny thing couldn't have been bigger than his fist, covered in the softest golden fur that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The creature's breathing was so shallow Jake could barely see its tiny chest moving. Its eyes, when they fluttered open for just a moment, were the most beautiful violet color he'd ever seen. But those eyes were filled with pain and fear, and Jake could tell it was dying. "Oh, you poor little thing," Jake whispered, carefully scooping up the fragile creature in his hands. It was so light it felt like holding a feather, and so cold its tiny body was shivering uncontrollably. Jake knew the rules. Any alien life forms were supposed to be turned over to the military immediately for study and quarantine. But looking down at this tiny helpless creature that was clearly just a baby, all those regulations seemed stupid and cruel. This wasn't some dangerous alien weapon. This was just a scared, hurt little animal that needed help. "I'm going to call you Luna," Jake said softly, wrapping the tiny creature in a warm cloth from his emergency kit. "Because you're golden like the moon and because you're going to survive this, okay?" The next few hours were the longest of Jake's life. He converted part of his ship's medical bay into a makeshift nursery, using heating lamps to keep Luna warm and modified nutrient solutions to try to feed her. Every few minutes he checked to make sure she was still breathing, his heart stopping every time her tiny chest seemed to pause too long between breaths. Jake had never felt so helpless. He was a trained military pilot, used to handling dangerous situations and making split-second decisions under pressure. But keeping one tiny alien kitten alive felt harder than anything he'd ever faced in combat. Every choice mattered. Too much heat could kill her. Too little and she'd freeze. The wrong nutrition mix could poison her delicate system. "Come on, Luna," he whispered during the worst moments, when her breathing became so faint he could barely detect it. "You've survived the destruction of your entire ship. You've made it through floating in space. You can make it through this too." As Jake worked through the night, carefully monitoring Luna's vital signs and adjusting her care, he couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her people. The debris field suggested the ship had been attacked, not destroyed by accident. Someone had targeted that vessel specifically, and they'd made sure nothing survived. Almost nothing. Meanwhile, thousands of light-years away, encrypted messages bounced between hidden bases and secret organizations throughout the galaxy. Fragments of intercepted communications spoke of impossible things. Ancient bloodlines thought extinct. Royal heirs that should have died with their people. Search teams were quietly assembled, bounty hunters were contacted, and old enemies who thought they were finally safe began to look over their shoulders again. But Jake knew nothing about any of that. All he cared about was the tiny golden creature sleeping peacefully in his makeshift nursery, finally stable after hours of touch-and-go medical care. Luna had survived her first night and that felt like a miracle. As Jake watched her sleep, her golden fur catching the soft light of the medical bay, he made a promise that would change both their lives forever. Whatever Luna was, wherever she came from, she was his responsibility now. He would protect her, raise her, and make sure she never had to face the cold emptiness of space alone again. He had no idea he was raising the future Empress of the galaxy. 18 months had passed since Jake found Luna floating in the wreckage, and the tiny golden kitten had grown into something extraordinary. She now stood about knee-high to Jake, roughly the size of a medium dog, but her proportions remained distinctly feline. Her golden fur had deepened into a rich amber color that seemed to glow softly in dim light, and those violet eyes had grown even more striking as she matured. What amazed Jake most wasn't Luna's physical growth, but her incredible intelligence. She had started understanding human speech within just a few weeks of recovery, tilting her head thoughtfully whenever Jake spoke to her. By 6 months, she was responding to complex commands and even showing what seemed like emotional reactions to different situations. Now, at a year and a half old, Luna could operate basic ship controls, understand navigation charts, and even seemed to grasp mathematical concepts when Jake worked on calculations. "Luna, can you bring me the plasma coupling from the storage locker?" Jake called out one morning while repairing the ship's engine. Without hesitation, Luna padded over to the correct compartment, used her retractable claws to open the latch, and carefully carried the delicate component back in her mouth. Her movements were always precise and graceful, never dropping or damaging anything despite her growing size. Jake had initially worried about keeping Luna's existence secret from his military supervisors, but his patrol routes kept him in remote sectors of space for weeks at a time. As long as he filed his reports on schedule and responded to emergency calls, nobody questioned what he did during his off-duty hours. Luna had become his constant companion on these lonely missions, and Jake couldn't imagine exploring the galaxy without her anymore. During their quiet evenings together, Jake would read aloud from his digital library while Luna curled up beside him, her purring creating a soothing vibration that helped him relax after long days of patrol duty. Sometimes he caught her watching the star charts with intense focus, as if she was memorizing the locations of different systems. When he pointed out various planets and explained their characteristics, Luna's ears would perk up with obvious interest. "You're too smart for your own good, aren't you?" Jake would tease, scratching behind her ears in the spot that always made her purr louder. "Sometimes I think you understand more than you're letting on." Everything changed during what should have been a routine supply run to Station Beta 7. Jake was docked at the trading post, loading up on food and equipment, when the proximity alarms started screaming throughout the station. 3 unmarked ships had dropped out of hyperspace and were moving in fast, their weapon systems already charging. "All civilian vessels, this is Captain Rodriguez of Station Beta 7, the announcement crackled over the comm system. "We have incoming hostiles. Seal your ships and prepare for possible boarding. Security teams to battle stations." Jake's blood ran cold. Space pirates were becoming more common in the outer sectors, targeting isolated trading posts and lone patrol ships. These weren't random criminals looking for quick cash though. Their ships were too well equipped, their approach too coordinated. This was a professional raiding operation. "Luna, get to the safe compartment," Jake ordered, rushing to disconnect his ship from the station's docking clamps. But Luna didn't move toward the reinforced hiding spot Jake had built for emergencies like this. Instead, she positioned herself between Jake and the airlock, her violet eyes blazing with an intensity he'd never seen before. The station's defensive weapons opened fire, but the attacking ships easily avoided the slow-moving plasma bolts. Within minutes, Jake could hear the distinctive sound of cutting torches working on the station's hull. The pirates were coming aboard. Jake grabbed his sidearm and emergency kit, knowing his small patrol ship wouldn't stand a chance against 3 armed raiders in open space. His only hope was to stay docked and defend the station alongside the security teams. But as he moved toward the airlock, Luna suddenly stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Luna, move. We need to get to the security checkpoint," Jake urged, but she held her ground. Her fur was standing on end, and a low growling sound rumbled from deep in her throat. It was a sound Jake had never heard her make before, and it sent chills down his spine. The lights flickered as explosions echoed through the station corridors. Plasma fire and shouting voices grew closer as the pirates fought their way through the security teams. Jake could see flashes of laser fire through the small window in his airlock, and the acrid smell of burned metal filtered through the air recycling system. Then the pirates reached their section of the docking bay. 5 armed figures in combat armor burst through the emergency doors, their weapons sweeping the area for targets. They moved with military precision, covering each other's movements as they advanced toward the civilian ships. Jake raised his sidearm, knowing it was almost useless against their heavy armor. "Drop your weapon and surrender your cargo," the lead pirate called out through his helmet speaker system. "Comply and you might live through this." But before Jake could respond, something impossible happened. Luna stepped forward, and her violet eyes suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The air around her seemed to shimmer and bend, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Without making a sound, without even moving from her position, she somehow reached out with invisible force. The pirates' weapons simply stopped working. Not jammed or damaged, but completely dead, as if all the energy had been drained from their power cells simultaneously. Their helmet displays went dark, their communication systems failed, and even their armor's life support systems began shutting down one by one. "What the hell is that thing?" one of the pirates shouted, his voice muffled now that his helmet speakers had failed. They tried to retreat, stumbling over each other in their panic, but Luna wasn't finished. She let out a sound that Jake would never forget. It wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a scream, but something that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. The sound reverberated through the station's metal corridors, growing louder and more terrifying as it echoed. The pirates dropped their useless weapons and ran, their heavy boots clanging against the deck plates as they fled back toward their ships. Within minutes, the 3 raider vessels had disengaged from the station and jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind only the smell of fear and the memory of that otherworldly sound. Jake stared at Luna in stunned silence. She had returned to her normal appearance, her eyes their usual violet color, her fur lying flat against her sleek body. But something had fundamentally changed between them in those few terrifying minutes. Jake realized that his adopted companion wasn't just an intelligent alien animal. She was something far more powerful than he had ever imagined. 2 years had passed since the incident at Station Beta 7, and Luna had grown into something that took Jake's breath away every time he looked at her. She now stood as tall as a large panther, her sleek body rippling with hidden strength beneath fur that had transformed into the most beautiful amber coat Jake had ever seen. Golden patterns traced intricate designs across her flanks and shoulders, markings that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal in different lighting. But it was her eyes that truly captivated everyone who met her. Those violet orbs held an intelligence so profound that most humans found it unsettling to maintain eye contact for long. Luna could understand complex technical manuals, help Jake plot navigation courses through dangerous asteroid fields, and even predict mechanical failures before the ship's computers detected them. "She's not just smart, Jake," Dr. Patricia Wells had whispered during their last supply stop at Research Station Gamma. The elderly scientist had been studying xenobiology for 30 years, but Luna left her speechless. "She's operating on a level of intelligence that shouldn't be possible for any known species. Where did you say you found her again?" Jake had given his usual cover story about rescuing Luna from a damaged cargo vessel, but he could see the doubt in Dr. Wells' eyes. The truth was becoming harder to hide as Luna's abilities grew stronger with each passing month. She had learned to mask her more unusual talents around strangers, but Jake knew she was holding back something incredible. Their current mission took them to the Outer Rim territories, exploring abandoned mining colonies and mapping uncharted systems. It was lonely work, but Jake preferred it that way. Out here, thousands of light years from the nearest military base, he and Luna could be themselves without worrying about uncomfortable questions or government regulations. What Jake didn't know was that their activities hadn't gone unnoticed. Deep in the classified archives of the Terran Defense Force, Dr. Richard Hayes was studying energy signature reports that had been flagging unusual readings across multiple star systems. The patterns were subtle but consistent, always appearing in areas where Patrol Ship 7 had been operating. "These readings don't match any known technology," Dr. Hayes muttered to his research assistant while reviewing the latest batch of sensor data. "But they're definitely artificial. Something out there is generating controlled psionic energy on a scale we've never recorded before." Meanwhile, in the shadowy corners of the galaxy where old legends refused to die, ancient Vexhai cultists gathered in hidden temples carved from asteroids and forgotten moons. Their weathered hands traced sacred symbols while they chanted prophecies passed down through generations of believers. "The Golden Empress stirs," whispered Elder Corvain, his scarred face illuminated by flickering candlelight. "The signs are unmistakable. She who was lost shall return to reclaim her throne. The blood of emperors flows once more through living veins." These cultists had spent decades searching for any trace of their lost royal family, following rumors and false leads across the galaxy. But now their ancient instruments, relics of HFY technology that had somehow survived the Great Purge, were detecting energy patterns that matched their oldest records. Somewhere among the stars, their prophesied Empress lived and grew stronger. Jake knew nothing about government surveillance or religious fanatics. He was focused on their current exploration of the Kepler Nebula, where his sensors had detected unusual mineral deposits on a small moon orbiting a gas giant. The readings suggested rare elements that could be worth a fortune if properly harvested. "What do you think, Luna?" Jake asked as they approached the mining site. "Should we check it out or move on to the next system?" Luna studied the sensor displays with intense concentration, her violet eyes reflecting the swirling colors of the nebula outside their viewports. After a moment, she made a soft chirping sound that Jake had learned meant disagreement or concern. "You don't like something about this place?" Jake frowned, running additional scans. "The readings look normal to me. No ships, no life signs, just an abandoned mining operation." But Luna's unease proved justified when they landed on the moon's rocky surface. The mining facility looked wrong somehow, too intact for something that had supposedly been abandoned for years. The equipment was positioned strategically rather than randomly, and several of the structures showed signs of recent modification. "This is a trap," Jake realized too late as armed figures emerged from concealment around their landing site. These weren't pirates or random criminals. Their gear was military grade, their movements coordinated and professional. Someone had been expecting them. "Captain Sullivan," called out the leader through an external speaker system. "You are under arrest by authority of the Xenobiology Enforcement Division. Surrender your illegal alien specimen immediately." Jake's blood turned to ice. They knew about Luna. Somehow, despite all his precautions, the government had tracked them down. He watched in horror as more soldiers appeared, forming a perfect circle around his ship with weapons trained on every possible exit. Luna pressed against Jake's side, her body tense with barely controlled energy. He could feel vibrations running through her frame, like a generator building up to dangerous levels. Her violet eyes had begun to glow with that familiar inner light, and the air around them seemed to thicken with potential violence. "Stay calm," Jake whispered to her, though his own heart was racing. "Let me handle this." But Luna had no intention of letting anyone take her away from Jake. These humans had come to separate them, to cage her like some laboratory animal while they studied her abilities. The very thought triggered something primal and fierce deep within her genetic memory. She stepped forward, placing herself between Jake and the armed soldiers. Her movements were fluid and graceful, but every line of her body radiated lethal intent. The golden patterns on her fur began to pulse with soft light, and her violet eyes blazed like twin stars. The soldiers hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Their briefings had described Luna as an intelligent alien animal, possibly dangerous but essentially a large cat. What they saw before them was something entirely different. This creature moved with the confidence of an apex predator that had never known fear, never backed down from a challenge. "Target the specimen with stun weapons," the squad leader ordered, but his voice carried less conviction than before. "Remember, we need it alive for study." That single word, "it," was Luna's breaking point. Jake wasn't just her rescuer or companion. He was her chosen family, the one being in the universe who had shown her kindness when she was helpless and afraid. These soldiers wanted to reduce her to a laboratory specimen, to strip away everything that made her who she was. Luna's response was swift and terrible. She didn't roar or snarl like an angry animal. Instead, she moved like liquid shadow, her form blurring as she covered the distance between herself and the nearest soldier in the blink of an eye. Her claws, which Jake had always seen used so gently for ship repairs and delicate tasks, extended to their full length and sliced through reinforced combat armor like it was made of paper. The soldier's weapon fell to the ground in pieces, cleanly severed at multiple points. His armor's chest plate had 4 parallel gashes through it, precise cuts that had somehow missed his skin by mere millimeters. He stared down at himself in shock, realizing that Luna could have killed him instantly but had chosen not to. The other soldiers opened fire, but their energy weapons seemed to bend around Luna as she moved. Plasma bolts that should have struck her center mass somehow missed by impossible margins, as if reality itself was shifting to protect her. She flowed between their positions like a force of nature, dismantling weapons and armor with surgical precision while leaving the humans inside essentially unharmed. In less than 30 seconds, 8 heavily armed soldiers found themselves standing in the ruins of their equipment, completely defenseless against a creature they had vastly underestimated. Luna stood in the center of their broken circle, her amber fur gleaming in the alien moonlight, violet eyes blazing with power that made the air itself seem to tremble. For the first time, Jake understood what Luna truly was. Not just an intelligent alien, not even just a powerful predator, but something that had once ruled among the stars. Something that remembered what it felt like to command entire fleets and decide the fate of worlds. The hunt for the lost Vex-High heir had finally ended. But the hunters had become the prey, and they were facing something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The attack came without warning during what should have been their safest moment. Jake and Luna had docked at Haven Station, a neutral trading post known for its strict no-weapons policy and peaceful atmosphere. Jake needed medical supplies for a minor injury he'd sustained while repairing their ship's hull, and Luna had been looking forward to exploring the station's exotic food vendors. They never made it past the docking bay. The assassins had been waiting in the shadows, professional killers hired by forces that Jake couldn't even imagine. These weren't government agents or military personnel. They were something far worse. Mercenaries who specialized in hunting down targets that conventional forces couldn't handle. Their weapons were designed specifically to kill alien life forms, loaded with toxins that could drop a Vex-High warrior in seconds. Jake saw the muzzle flash first, a brief orange flare in his peripheral vision. His combat training kicked in immediately, throwing himself sideways as the high-velocity projectile whistled past his ear. But the second shooter had anticipated his movement, and Jake felt the burning pain as the bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the deck. Jake. Luna's voice echoed in his mind for the first time, clear as if she had spoken aloud. The shock of hearing her telepathic communication was almost as intense as the pain from his wound. But there was no time to process this revelation because more shots were already coming their way. Luna moved like lightning, her body flowing between Jake and the attackers with impossible speed. But even her incredible reflexes couldn't deflect the specialized ammunition designed to penetrate Vex-High defenses. Jake watched in horror as one of the toxic rounds grazed Luna's flank, leaving a smoking wound in her beautiful amber fur. The battle was brief but devastating. Luna fought with a fury Jake had never witnessed before, her claws tearing through the assassin's armor like tissue paper. But the damage had already been done. The poison in that single graze was spreading through her system, designed specifically to target Vex-High biology. Jake could see her movements becoming sluggish, her violet eyes losing their usual brilliant clarity. By the time station security arrived, 3 assassins lay dead and 2 others had fled into the crowded marketplace. Jake was barely conscious from blood loss, and Luna had collapsed beside him, her breathing shallow and labored. The toxic compound was shutting down her nervous system, and Jake could feel his heart breaking as he watched her struggle against the alien poison. The next 72 hours blurred together in a haze of medical procedures and desperate hope. Jake underwent surgery to repair the damage to his shoulder while Luna fought for her life in the station's veterinary facility. The doctors had never seen anything like her species before, and their standard treatment seemed useless against the sophisticated toxin. Jake refused to leave Luna's side once his own injuries were stabilized. He sat beside her medical pod, holding vigil as her vital signs fluctuated wildly. Sometimes she seemed to be recovering, her breathing growing stronger and her eyes opening briefly to look at him. Other times, she would slip into episodes where her body temperature spiked dangerously high and her limbs trembled with involuntary spasms. "Come on, Luna," Jake whispered during the worst moments, pressing his uninjured hand against the clear wall of her containment unit. "You've survived everything else. Don't give up now. I need you to fight this." But on the third night, something changed. Luna's condition suddenly stabilized, but not in the way the doctors had expected. Instead of gradually recovering, she seemed to be transforming. Her body temperature normalized, but her cellular activity increased dramatically. The monitoring equipment registered energy readings unlike anything the medical staff had ever recorded. Jake watched in amazement as Luna began to grow. Not gradually like a normal healing process but rapidly and purposefully. Her muscles expanded and lengthened, her bones stretched and thickened, and her entire frame restructured itself into something magnificent and terrifying. Within hours she had reached her full adult size, standing 7 feet at the shoulder with a presence that seemed to fill the entire medical bay. But the most dramatic change wasn't physical. As Luna's body completed its transformation, her violet eyes opened with a new awareness that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. These weren't the curious, intelligent eyes of the companion he had raised. These were the eyes of someone who remembered exactly who and what she was meant to be. Ancient genetic memories flooded through Luna's consciousness like a dam bursting. She saw the great ships of her ancestors cutting through space, their golden hulls gleaming like miniature suns. She remembered the feel of 1,000 worlds bowing before the Vexhai Empire, the weight of absolute authority, the responsibility of ruling species across 100 star systems. She was Lunahai, last daughter of the Golden Throne, heir to an empire that had once spanned half the known galaxy. The poison that should have killed her had instead triggered the final awakening that marked the transition from adolescent to adult in her species. She was no longer just Luna, Jake's beloved companion. She was the Empress, and the galaxy would soon remember why her people had been feared and respected throughout the stars. But even as cosmic power flowed through her transformed body, even as reality seemed to bend around her presence, one thing remained unchanged. The human who sat beside her medical pod, his face pale with worry and exhaustion, was still the most important thing in her universe. Jake had found her when she was dying and alone. He had raised her with patience and love, teaching her not just how to survive but how to live with purpose and compassion. Jake. Luna spoke directly into his mind, her telepathic voice carrying warmth that wrapped around his consciousness like a gentle embrace. I remember everything now. I know what I am, what I was meant to become. But none of that changes what matters most. Jake stared at her in wonder as she rose from the medical pod, her massive form moving with fluid grace. The containment unit, designed to hold creatures much smaller than her current size, simply couldn't contain her anymore. But she didn't break free with violence or anger. Instead, she seemed to phase through the walls like they were made of mist, reality bending to accommodate her will. You saved me when I was nothing but a dying kitten floating in space, Luna continued, her mental voice filled with love and determination. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to believe in kindness when I had every reason to expect cruelty. That bond cannot be broken by transformation or time or the weight of ancient crowns. As she spoke, Luna lowered her great head and gently pressed her forehead against Jake's chest, careful not to hurt him with her newfound size and strength. Her purr, now deep enough to vibrate through the deck plating, filled the medical bay with a sound of perfect contentment. I am the Empress of the Vexhai, the last of the golden bloodline, inheritor of power beyond mortal understanding, Luna said, her telepathic voice carrying both imperial authority and infinite affection. But before all of that, always before all of that, I am your Luna. And you, Jake Sullivan, will stand beside me as we reclaim what was stolen from my people. Not as my servant or my subject, but as my chosen family, my equal in all things that truly matter. The universe had just gained its most dangerous apex predator. But she still purred when the man who raised her scratched behind her ears. 6 months after Luna's transformation into her full imperial form, the galaxy had learned to whisper her name with a mixture of awe and terror. Empress Lunahai commanded a fleet that seemed to grow larger every week, as ships from dozens of different species arrived to pledge their loyalty to the returned Vexhai heir. But this wasn't conquest through fear or domination. Instead, Luna had done something that surprised everyone, including herself. She had chosen justice over revenge. Jake stood on the bridge of their flagship, the Starfire Phoenix, watching as another convoy of refugee ships approached their position. These were survivors from the Kepler mining colony, where corporate overlords had been using slave labor to extract rare minerals. Luna's fleet had arrived 3 days ago, and the liberation had taken less than 6 hours. Status report, Commander Torres. Luna's voice resonated through the bridge speakers, though she was physically present in her command chamber 1 deck below. Her size made it impossible for her to fit on the standard bridge, so Jake had helped design a special command center that could accommodate her 7-foot frame while keeping her connected to all ship operations. All civilians have been evacuated safely, Empress, Commander Torres replied. The middle-aged woman had been a career military officer before joining Luna's cause, drawn by stories of the Golden Empress who fought for the oppressed rather than personal power. The mining corporation's private security forces surrendered without major resistance. They've agreed to pay full compensation to all former workers. Jake smiled as he listened to the report. This was Luna's way of doing things now. She could have simply destroyed the mining operation and executed everyone involved, and 6 months ago, that's exactly what most people expected from a returning Vexhai Empress. Instead, she had given the corporate executives a choice: reform their labor practices and pay reparations, or face the consequences of continuing their exploitation. Most chose reform. Excellent work, Commander, Luna responded, her mental voice carrying the warmth she reserved for her trusted officers. Jake, could you join me in the command chamber? I want to review our next destination. Jake made his way through the ship's corridors, nodding to crew members who had learned to treat him with the same respect they showed their Empress. It still felt surreal sometimes, being the strategic advisor to one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But Luna had insisted that their relationship remain unchanged despite her transformation. She valued his perspective precisely because he had known her before she became a legend. The command chamber was a marvel of engineering, designed to blend Vex-High Imperial architecture with human ergonomics. Luna reclined on a massive platform that allowed her to interface directly with the ship's systems, while holographic displays showed real-time information from across their fleet. Her amber coat gleamed in the soft lighting, and those violet eyes held depths of knowledge that sometimes made Jake feel dizzy to contemplate. "Jake," Luna purred as he entered, her massive head turning toward him with obvious pleasure. "I've been reviewing intelligence reports from our scout ships. The situation in the Andromeda sector is worse than we thought." Jake settled into his command chair, specially positioned so he could maintain eye contact with Luna during their strategic discussions. "How bad are we talking?" "The hegemony has been conducting genetic experiments on captured alien populations." Luna's mental voice carried cold fury that made the air itself seem to chill. "They're trying to create artificial Vex-High warriors using DNA samples they recovered from ancient battlefields. The test subjects are suffering tremendously, and the results are abominations that bear no resemblance to my people's true nature." Jake felt his own anger rising. The Terran hegemony had been one of the political entities responsible for the original Vex-High genocide, though they'd hidden their involvement behind layers of propaganda and false flag operations. Now they were trying to recreate the very people they destroyed, probably to use as weapons against Luna's growing coalition. "How many prisoners are we looking at?" Jake asked, already knowing they would mount a rescue operation regardless of the difficulty. "Approximately 15,000 beings from 12 different species," Luna replied, her violet eyes blazing with determination. "The facility is heavily defended, but my intelligence network has provided detailed schematics. We can get them out, Jake. All of them." This was what Jake loved most about the person Luna had become. Despite her incredible power, despite commanding enough firepower to level entire star systems, she still chose to save lives rather than simply destroy her enemies. The old Vex-High Empire might have ruled through strength and intimidation, but Luna was building something entirely different. "What's the plan?" Jake asked, pulling up the tactical displays. For the next 2 hours, they worked together to develop a rescue strategy that would minimize casualties while maximizing the chance of success. Luna's strategic mind was incredible to witness in action, processing dozens of variables simultaneously while maintaining focus on their core objective of preserving life. Jake contributed his human perspective, helping to anticipate how their enemies might react and suggesting alternative approaches when Luna's more direct Imperial instincts took over. "The assault begins in 18 hours, Luna announced to the fleet once their planning was complete. "Remember, our primary objective is the rescue of innocent prisoners. Disable rather than destroy whenever possible. We are not conquerors seeking to spread fear. We are liberators fighting to restore justice to a galaxy that has forgotten its meaning." The Battle of Andromeda Station became the stuff of legends within days. Luna led the assault personally, her massive form moving through the station's corridors like a force of nature. Security forces that had seemed unstoppable against unarmed prisoners fled in terror when confronted with 7 feet of angry Empress whose claws could slice through bulkheads like butter. But it wasn't Luna's physical prowess that won the battle. It was her tactical brilliance, her ability to coordinate complex rescue operations while engaging enemy forces, and her unwavering commitment to protecting the innocent. When hegemony reinforcements arrived expecting to find their research facility defended, they instead discovered that Luna had already evacuated all prisoners and transformed the station into a fortress that her forces could hold indefinitely. The hegemony commanders, realizing they were outmatched, attempted to negotiate a withdrawal. Luna's response became famous throughout the galaxy: "You have 3 minutes to surrender unconditionally, or I will demonstrate why my ancestors were feared among the stars. Choose wisely." They chose surrender. Jake watched the aftermath from the Phoenix's observation deck, Luna's massive form curled beside him as they looked out at the rescued ships preparing for their journey to freedom. 15,000 beings from a dozen species were alive and safe because Luna had chosen compassion over conquest. "Are you proud of what we've accomplished?" Luna asked, her mental voice soft and contemplative. "I'm proud of who you've chosen to become," Jake replied, reaching out to scratch behind her ears in the spot that had always been her favorite. "You could have become exactly what everyone expected, a terrible force of vengeance seeking to rebuild an empire through fear. Instead, you've become something better. Something the galaxy actually needs." Luna's purr filled the observation deck, a sound of perfect contentment that vibrated through the ship's hull. "I learned from the best teacher," she said, pressing her great head against Jake's shoulder. "A man who showed kindness to a dying kitten when he could have simply followed regulations. Everything good about who I am today traces back to that choice you made in a debris field 4 years ago." As they watched the stars together, Jake reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. He had saved a tiny alien kitten from the cold vacuum of space, never imagining he was rescuing the future Empress of the galaxy. Now they stood together as partners, family, and friends, leading a coalition that was reshaping the political landscape of known space. The galaxy had gained its most dangerous apex predator, capable of bending reality to her will and commanding fleets that could conquer star systems. But she still purred when her adoptive father scratched behind her ears, and she still sought his advice before making important decisions. Some bonds, Jake realized, were stronger than empires, more enduring than legends, and more precious than all the power in the universe. Luna was living proof of that truth,